dice going live, you're live. Ok. Vediamo. Ok, si dice dal vivo. Cos'altro c'era? Aspetta. Anche se era detto di fare lo start recording allo stesso modo qui.
Sì.
Perfetto. L'unica cosa che posso fare adesso è vedere se il display capture funziona un secondo da YouTube.
Prova. Spegni il microfono che si sente tutto su YouTube. Spegni il microfono su OBS. Ah, scusa, forse non mi sentivi. Su YouTube adesso riesco a vedere tutto. Sì, c'è un delay. No, va bene, dai. Tranquilla, se c'è qualche problema ti scrivo. Va bene, ciao.
Good morning, everyone. I see that some of you have already connected.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I see that some people are online. Can you let us know if you can hear as well? You can do so by tapping in the chat. Let me double check. And I will also try to see. Okay. Can some, hello? And I will also try to see. Perfect. So you can hear me. That's very good to hear. So sorry, I was just double checking that everything worked fine and that we didn't have any technical issues. First of all, good morning and thank you for joining this EURES webinar on supporting job seekers with disabilities and introduction. This webinar is going to include 4 main presentations by 4 different colleagues. And let me see if I can move slides. As you can see, the agenda should pop up on the screen at any minute. We're going to have 4 main presentations, as I mentioned. The first presentation will be provided by Daphne Arendt from Eurofund, and Daphne Arendt will present some of the barriers. You can hear me double, you mentioned. Let me check. Is it better now? Yes, I think it should be okay now. Can you please confirm? Whether this is the case or not? Okay, let me know if this continue. No, wait. I will try something else. Is it better now? Can you hear me? Hello? It's not better. Okay. What about now? I know there's a lag, but you should be able to hear me better at this point. Double voice still. Let me check. Okay, so they told me that, okay, I think it's getting better. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to have 4 different presentations. One person, Daphne, will present a session on the main barriers that job seekers with disabilities face. And Daphne, can I ask you to mute yourself? And she will also discuss possible enablers that may facilitate the transition to employment of job seekers with disability. And then there's going to be 3 different presentations by colleagues from EURES Ireland and EURES France on their experiences with this topic. If you all agree, I would suggest that Daphne starts her presentation.
Okay. Can you see my presentation? Yes, fantastic. So thank you very much, Federica, and thank you very much, EURES, for inviting Eurofound to speak at this webinar this morning. As you already said, my name is Daphne Arendt, and I'm a researcher at Eurofound. So we're an EU agency based in Dublin, and next year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. So we're one of the oldest agencies in Europe. And our mission is to provide evidence-based knowledge to assist policymakers in the development of better living and working conditions in Europe. So in that context, that's why I'm here today. I'm going to give a short introduction to set the scene that I hope will be fruitful in the discussion on how job seekers with disabilities can be supported. And I wanted to start by showing you the disability employment gap. What you see on this slide is the gap for 2019 and 2023 for all the member states. And you see the percentage point difference between people with disabilities that are in employment age 20 to 64 and people without disabilities. And as you can see, it's a large gap. It's a gap that's more than 20 percentage points. And over time, this gap has really remained persistent. You will also see that it varies somewhat between countries. This, we think, is mostly due to differences in institutional factors like implementation of anti-discrimination law, the type of welfare state regime, and differences in labor market policies. But I think the main point to make is that there is a persistent gap, that people with disabilities have more difficulties entering the labor market. And I think what's also really important to stress, particularly in the context of today's discussion, is that there are a lot of people with disabilities that aren't active at all on the open labor market. And what's important to note in that context is really the degree of disability. So the more severe a person's disability, the less likely it actually is that they're able to participate or have a chance to participate in the labor market. So next on this slide, what I wanted to highlight is that Eurofound's work focuses very much on collecting data. This is the source of a lot of our research. And I wanted to let you know that our European Working Conditions Survey has been in the field for its 24th edition since very recently. So it came out of the field at the end of November. And what will be very relevant new data in the context of this survey is on job quality and being able to also understand the job quality of workers with disabilities. So this is a survey that focuses very much on workers, so people that already have a job, but we also have our other surveys, and today I'm going to share very briefly some results from our e-survey. And that survey we started during the Corona period, but we've continued it as an annual tool, and it also allows us to examine the social situation of people with disabilities, and we've been able to do so since 21. And I'm showing this to you to give you a little bit of background. So what we've done is we've carried out some regression analyses to better understand what determines the quality of life for people with disabilities. And what you see here is only the results for those with disabilities. And we see very strongly that low income and being unemployed have a negative impact or lead to a lower score in life satisfaction. And same goes for optimism. And in fact, it counts for all the sort of quality of life indicators that we have in our survey, that we cover in our survey. And so what really I wanted to highlight here is how important it is for people with disabilities to be in work. So in order to have a good quality of life, work, having a job matters. But as we saw earlier from the disability employment gap, participation in the labor market remains a major challenge for people with disabilities. And here what you see is what we found from a study that we published in 21, where we examined policy developments in the member states that looked into how people with disabilities can be supported to participate in the labor market, what really the main obstacles were to enter. And so it won't come as a surprise, but I do want to highlight these. So the extent of disability-related stereotypes is still fairly rampant across our lives. And then the other issue that people with disabilities face is bureaucratic difficulties in accessing services. We also noted that there's quite limited monitoring of policy implementation. So we don't always know what works. That's why it's really important to carry out evaluation studies. Employers don't always have the resources that they need. There's lack of specialist support. And then the other thing that I already referred to earlier is these inactivity traps. So people are often dependent on benefits, and the longer you stay out of work, the more difficult it is to get back into work. But some member states have strict conditions. So when you get a job, you risk losing your disability benefits, but you need these to pay for the additional support required. And I think the other important thing to note when we talk about people with disabilities is that they are not a homogeneous group. I mean, they're very heterogeneous, like the population is. But so in terms of the degree of disability, in terms of their age, in terms of their level of education, and in terms of their skills. But they often face cumulative disadvantages. So being a woman and having a disability is a cumulative factor. And so when we talk about disability, we also need to consider that the type of support that people require is different. It also depends on whether they are outside of the labor market, whether they are close to entry or re-entry, or already in employment. And this really makes disability a complex issue. So now I would like to zoom into the results from this study that we carried out in 21. And with the support of our network of correspondents who are situated in each of the member states, what we did is we collected over 150 measures that support job seekers with disabilities, or that support people with disabilities more generally. And to select the measures, we provided some instructions to our network correspondents. So the definition of disability that we used is Article 1 of the United Nations Convention. And the population that was covered was people with disabilities aged 15 to 64. And we then grouped these measures into 4 categories. And what's important to note is that we reviewed each measure to really get an exhaustive understanding of what kind of interventions are in place and what their effectiveness is. And to do so, we used a framework that is inspired by the realist evaluation techniques. And the key focus for us was to look at the mechanisms, the contexts, and the outcome patterns of these policy measures, so that we were able to understand what works for whom and under what circumstances. So if we focus specifically on support to individuals with disabilities, which is today's topic, here we got 54 measures, so it was roughly 35% of all the measures that we examined. And what we can see here is that they vary quite significantly. So again, we regrouped them into 7 subcategories. But what they really all have in common is that they provide support to job seekers and employees with disabilities so that they can get ready for work and achieve better employability and employment outcomes in an effort to obtain access to the labor market. Now, for today's presentation, I was going to zoom into 2 categories. The first is the largest category, all-encompassing and individual support. And the second is really a combined category of 3 of the items. So vocational training, transition from education, and skills enhancement and assessment. So moving on to the next chart, what you see here is from our report, an overview of how we did the review and what it got us. So first of all, you see the mechanism. So these all-encompassing and individual support measures, they allow tailored responses to be provided to different situations experienced by people with disabilities. It means services can be combined as a set of options or as a series of steps. As you can see, there were really a lot of benefits associated with the measures that fall into these categories. There were also some shortcomings. It's important to note that these measures require sufficient human and budgetary resources. But overall, if we look at the outcomes, we see that people with disabilities are supported in their specific needs and better enabled to work in the open labor market. And these measures also lead to better employment outcomes generally and provide people with disabilities prospects after they have participated in the programs. Now, similarly, if we look at the combined measures that I mentioned earlier, what they do is they provide in-class and vocational training to people with disabilities that often leads to internships and in-company experience and overall skill assessment and support. Again, there were quite a few benefits associated with these measures and also 2 shortcomings that you can see here. We noted that the visibility, so the knowledge, awareness of these measures was improving, but could still be increased. Again, if we think about the outcomes, what these measures do is they bring job seekers closer to the open labor market. They provide improved employment opportunities. They reduce the gap between education and employment. So that's really important, that you don't finish your education and then are left, and they lead to lasting forms of collaboration with stakeholders. So if we then consider the way forward, this is really what we found in our report and what we recommended. So we, at the time of writing in particular, it was very clear that for policy to be useful, we need data, we need information, and we need very clear definitions. People should be at the center of the discussion. I think this is always said. Support needs to be visible, inclusive, and accessible, and policy coordination and balance should be based on a life cycle approach. And obviously, it's very important to always be forward-looking. Now, before I finish, I wanted to briefly still mention data. I said that the situation has improved, and it is the case that especially through Eurostat's data collection, we now have more frequent data at a more granular level. But I think there's still lots of room for improvement. If you think about new topics or important topics like reasonable accommodation, there's very limited data on that. We know that member states still use different definitions of what it actually means. So it's really important to have these kinds of information in order for us researchers to provide the knowledge that the policymakers then need. And the second point I also already alluded to is that we need rigorous and systematic evaluation and monitoring of interventions in order to be able to know what works. I also think when it comes to visibility, we need to ensure that awareness is raised. And I always like to finish with what I think is the most important when we speak on this topic, is that the voices of people with disabilities need to be heard in the formulation of the policies that affect them. So thank you very much. You have my email address here and the link to the report. And apologies for my voice, but it's very early in Ireland still. So I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne, and thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from the audience? I see that there's quite of you online, and if you want to ask any questions, please do so by writing comments, and I will ask them to the speakers. Also, if the other speakers have any other questions to each other, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. I see that there are some questions related to the slide that needs to be checked before we can share any slides. But for the people that are interested, I will put the email of the project in the chat, and you can reach out to me in case you want access to those. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I see some thank yous to Daphne for her presentation, which is always nice to hear. If there are no other questions, I would suggest that we move on to the next presentation. So Jennifer, this would be your turn. If you want, you can also provide a bit overview of who you are and what you do before you start your presentation.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Jennifer Fitzpatrick, and I'm a EURES advisor in Ireland. I also work as part of that role, I work for the Irish Public Employment Service. Anyone in Ireland would recognise us as Intro, and I work in the Employer Relations division. I provide recruitment support to employers and advocate on behalf of job seekers as part of that role. And as part of my EURES role, obviously my work there is to support labour mobility with workers and with employers. That is really wrapped up in making it easier for employers, job candidates and workers to access information, guidance and funding where they're looking for work opportunities. So this morning, my goal is to introduce you to work and access supports that are available in Ireland. To start with, I am going to share my screen and fingers crossed it all goes to plan. And we have a very short Okay, so I'm going to switch from that now to a short presentation. And I hope everybody can see the screen there. Is everybody able to see? Yeah, great. Okay. So as I said, my aim this morning is to introduce you to the work and access supports that are available in Ireland. So the principles of the work and access are to remove the unnecessary barriers to employment. Inherent in the work and access is to empower people with disabilities to pursue their work and employment ambitions, and also then to empower employers to create those inclusive workplaces and to provide those equal employment opportunities. And this is done through information, training and funding to give supports based on work needs and to meet those needs. And from our point of view, of course, then to provide value for money. So the Work and Access was launched as a programme in July of 2024, and this encompasses the set of supports that are there to help people with disabilities to get a job, to return to work, or simply to stay in work. It replaces funds that were available previously. So those were the Reasonable Accommodation Fund and the Disability Awareness Support Scheme. Those were both reviewed, and the review was published in August 2023. And what we have now are the current supports that are available to job candidates, to employees and to employers, including self-employed. And I'm going to go through those as well and give you some information. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them into the chat as we go along. We'll answer them at the end. And those slides will be available, or these slides will be available to anybody that wishes to avail of them afterwards as well. So what supports are available? Initially, we have the Workplace Needs Assessment, and this funding can be applied for by an employer, an employee, or a self-employed person. That's funding to hire specialists to carry out an assessment of the workplace. The funding is up to €2,500, usually for an occupational therapist to do that assessment. The second category of support available is communication support, and this is available to job candidates, to employees and to self-employed people. The funding is around and the support is around the interview in the first instance. So, for example, if somebody needs a sign language interpreter, there's support for 1 hour pre-interview support there and 3 hours for an interview. What's interesting to note about this is it's not limited to a number of interviews. If somebody has to do 2, 5, 10, 30 interviews and wishes to apply for the support, please do. There's support around the job induction process for new appointees, and this can be the max is 12 hours over a 12-month period, and that's for new appointees. In work as well, there's 24 hours available in a 12-month period as well for in-work communication support. Anybody can apply for one or all of those. So to recap on those, the sign language interpreter is the example I gave. So 1 hour for pre-interview, 3 hours for an interview, some job induction support and in-work support as required as well. When we look then, the next heading specifically around in-work support is for an employee or self-employed person, where somebody can apply for funding of up to €12,500 per year, 12,500 to employ a specialist support worker. That's for the employee to carry out their work or to be retrained in the role. There's also communication support of up to 30 hours available for contact with a relevant specialist. The example I gave there was this sign language interpreter. It is important to note for this funding, there must be a work needs assessment in place, first of all. For the personal reader, this is support to assist with work-related reading, and there's funding available there for an employee or self-employed person of up to €12,500 per annum as well. You may need the work needs assessment done, but it's not required for the recruitment process. For work equipment, again, for an employee or self-employed person, assistive equipment or technology can be funded up to €12,000, which is quite a substantial sum. The technology or the assistive equipment can be provided in business premises, or if somebody's working remotely or has a self-employed premises as well. And this funding can cover training to use the specialist equipment. And again, the work needs assessment might be necessary there. When we look at the employer supports, we're looking then at the workplace adaptations. So for an employer or self-employed person, there's funding available up to €25,000 towards the cost of adapting equipment or technology. And again, that can be provided in a business premises, which is not the person's home, or in a remote or self-employed premises, which can be the person's home. You may need the work needs assessment there to support the claims. And then our last category there is disability, equality and inclusion training. So employers can apply here for up to €20,000 per annum for some recognised training or from QQI approved training providers, and then also for courses that are not necessarily approved or certified. There's slight difference in the funding that's available. It's 80% or 90%. As with anything, we try and limit the paperwork, but approval is based on fulfilling all of the criteria, and it is important to get approval from your local intro office and from your local intro support worker there before you progress with spending on any of those categories. I have given you a whistle-stop tour there of the overview of the supports. What's really important to remember is that there are supports available to job candidates in the recruitment process, to employees who are in existing roles or returning to work, for self-employed people and for employers. If you have any questions at all, please throw them into the chat. And also, if anybody wants to follow up at any stage, I'm based in the Eastern region, which is covering Dublin, our capital city and capital county, and also Kildare and Wicklow. If anybody would like a follow-up at any stage, an individual conversation, that can be facilitated.
Thank you, Jennifer. for your presentation. And I would like...
Apologies, Federica. I did go too quickly through there. If you want me to go back over anything in more detail, I'm leaving it open to anybody who's on the call, and I can go through each part. That was the overview. But of course, if anybody wants more detail, please feel free.
Jennifer, I see that there is actually a question in the chat, so I may read it for you.
Yeah.
The question is, what are the obligations of companies to employ people with disabilities? Should they have a minimum depending on the size of the company?
There is legally an employer is required to make reasonable accommodations, and definitely refer to that. So under our equality legislation, it is expected that everybody is given the same equal opportunities. So these supports are in place to make it much easier where there are barriers for either the employer or the employee.
Okay, thank you. And do you know whether there is a minimum percentage? Daphne, I don't know whether you also have some information on this, on whether companies have some obligations and minimum caps to employ people with disabilities. I don't know whether you've come across this information, just asking.
So first of all, reasonable accommodation is an obligation, as Jennifer already explained. And then some countries have quotas, but that varies between member states. So there's no, I think that's a separate discussion. But I think the starting point is that reasonable accommodation. First of all, reasonable accommodation is also a very broad term, covers a lot. So people sometimes get confused by the word accommodation and think that it only refers to the physical accommodating, but it's more than that. But that's an obligation that's set out in legislation.
If I could just come back in there, Federica, as well, just on the supports that we provide, and it might provide a little bit of clarity. It's a broader answer, but the supports that who can apply once somebody's over 18 and within a legal working age and has the right to work in Ireland, and particularly for these supports, is working with any sector apart from the public sector. And has a disability or health condition that impacts on their ability to work, that is likely to last longer than 12 months. They're the only criteria around the supports that apply. So it's not around sort of a quota or a particular any other specifics, if that makes it a little bit clearer.
Wait, I'm not sure whether you can hear me now. Yes, you should be able to hear me. As I mentioned, please use the chat to ask questions, but also to share your experience and maybe share good practices that you may find useful and that you have maybe applied in your job. And I also see another question in the meantime. And this question is a request for clarification on European regulations regarding the rights of people with disability, and a comment on the fact that the European Community Card can be an important step to guarantee equality. And I see also some comments from Italy concerning the fact that in Italy, companies with more than 16 employees with more than 16 employees up to 35 must employ one disabled person. From 35 to 50 employees, companies must hire 2 disabled people. And then this goes on. So as Daphne mentioned, there's no a common rule across European countries. And I see another question, which is on whether there are any studies of participation of persons with disabilities in relation to the implementation of personal assistance. I don't know whether any of you has any information about this. I don't see. I think this is something that we would need to explore further. And yep.
I can look into it a little bit. I don't think we have detailed information to the level of personal assistance.
Okay.
We have done studies on carers and informal carers, so there would be sort of more overall general information on their working conditions and their relationships with the person receiving care, but not specifically focused on personal assistance. But yeah, important topic.
Okay, thank you, Daphne. And I don't see any more questions for the time being, but there may keep coming. So I would suggest that we move on to the next 2 presentations by the colleagues from France Travail. If you want, please introduce yourselves with a few words before you start your presentation. And the floor is yours.
Lionel?
So I am Lionel Roland, Director of Cap Emploi in Savoie and Haute-Savoie region in France, and within the Cap Emploi network, coordinator of EURES of 26 EURES advisors. So we are specialized organism embedded in the PES system in France, but we have the goal of the presentation is to explain the history and where we are today and where we go tomorrow. So Jean-Christophe.
Thank you, Lionel. And I'm Jean-Christophe Bonin. I'm the Deputy Director of the Specific Directorate in France Travail. France Travail is the new PES in France in order to help people with disabilities and, of course, employers.
Before we go to the slides, it's very interesting to present after Daphne's and Jennifer's presentations, because it proves that there are many patterns and possibilities about considering the disability issue within the public employment system in Europe. So our presentation is based on a very local and French situation, and we choose to present a two voices presentation with Jean-Christophe, because the goal of the change implemented in France since a few years is to reproach France Travail and Cap Emploi, 2 operators within the PES system.
You want to continue? No. It's okay?
It's okay. First of all, it's kind of an answer of the Italian answer about the obligations. These disability issues in the employment system in France is a long history, and a very long history, because the first sign was in 1896 with the first law about health and accidents at work. the second time was a very long time ago, after World War I, and 500,000 people hurted very largely after the conflict, and many laws were taken in 2020. Sorry, 1924. Obligation of employment within all the government offices and so. But it's a long time history. The first modern law about disability at work was taken in 1987 with the obligation. And I've heard in France, it was an obligation for all the private sector, more than 20 salaries. 6% obligation of employment linked with penalties, financial penalties. So since January 1988, it was a large fund that was created and to implement a dedicated public policy about employment for people with disability, to support to job seekers, support to employers, but support to workers too, to avoid to lose the job due to disable or health and so. It was a very specific period, and a second time was the law of 11th February 2005, la loi pour l'égalité des droits et des chances des personnes handicapées. A huge law, a huge program with 102 articles from birth to death, school training, hospitals, employment, all the issues in the life were in this package, and the rules about employment and disabled people were very large at this time. In public sector, in private sector, with the obligations, but also the reasonable accommodation. And so reasonable accommodation is a very tough concept, because it is in law, but there is no concrete explanation. So everyone is it's a disturbing concept, in fact. The idea is okay, but how to implement this in a real situation is very, very hard issue. And during all this time, with the obligation, with the dedicated law, disabled issues were part of the public employment system, but we were two very different organisms between France Travail and before Pôle Emploi and so, and Cap Emploi, which was a dedicated organism created in 90 after the law of 87. A specialized organism on the one hand, a common service for everybody on the other hand, and we were neighbors. We were coordinating a bit, but it was not enough. And the choice in 2022 was to create a common future between France Travail and the Cap Emploi network. We can go on about...
Yes, just it's because we want to speak together, two speeches, one voice and one goal, finally. and it's sometimes a little bit complicated to explain why we have not only the PES or only a private or an associated speech. But this is the French organization. Sometimes it's a little bit complicated, but it's important for our audience to understand who we are and what we are doing regarding people with disabilities and employers. So link with what Daphne said and Eurofund said, of course, we are all confronted at some stereotype about people with disability. When we speak with employers or with citizens, of course, people with disability are most often in welfare. Of course not. A lot of people of disability born with disability, no. And a large part of our job is to explain to employers and to citizens and to policy the disability people are able to work, and it's not necessary to have a lot of fund to adapt the job. It's just necessary to understand what is disabilities, what they need, and what we can do. And this is my time, or Lionel?
We can present together. Since law of 2005, we in the industry we were on a medical definition of disability situations. Since 2005. We talk about disability situation at work, and we try, due to the law and all the measures that are implemented, to get the stakeholders informed about real disability situations at work, and with 80% of situations that are invisible disability situation, we have to talk about why how we make reasonable accommodations. So accommodations at work, organizational, human, with measures sometimes 10% about the work situations, and we have to make meetings between job seekers and employers with training, vocational training, and so to make employ more accessible. It was the rate between level of unemployment between all the population and disabled people was very large, but each year there is a very low improvement, and it was the rate of employment of people with disability was less than 2% of the salaries in the 1980s, and today we approach 4%. So during these years there is a very low improvement, and what we try to do between France Travail and Cap Emploi is to accelerate to improve this rate, which is the major priority. To talk about disability situations very normally in the relationships between employers and job seekers and workers is the main part of the job, the main part. To make disability issue exists in the common law, in the common system. That's what's at stake, and acceleration since 2 years.
when we ask to people with disabilities if they are able to speak about their health problems, their disabilities, a large part of them said no, because I'm afraid to be discriminated by the employers. But also, for our part, we need to know, because we need to promote their profile. We need to break the screening of disability. And it's our job for now. We have a specific test to promote these people with disability, but to promote, you could say you have disability, and it's not a problem regarding the employers. This is what we write. Disability must no longer be taboo. And it's important, because if we don't know, we don't have data, we couldn't promote their profile, we couldn't help employers.
One data that is major data. The system was based in 1987 on obligation. The rate 6% of obligation of employment of people with disability. But today, more than 30% of contracts of employment is made by little firms, less than 20 salaries. So even if there is no obligation, the fact to deal with disability situations, and so to make it the more common as possible, makes employment possible too. And the obligation is part of the issue, but not the whole issue. In recent years, the government policy has made a very new scale of cooperation between the different actors. When we talked about disability, there are several actors: medicals, administrative, PES, specialized organism, many, for the dumb, for the autism, and it's very, very difficult for the government, for the monitoring of public policies to understand anything in that. So in 2022, a very big deal and a grant between France Travail and the CHEOPS network was to talk about more than a cooperation, but something like embedding a specialized organism within the common PES system. That was the issue.
Yeah.
You follow?
Yes.
Thank you.
As Ben said, we built a specific service software. We wrote a one-stop disability support center in France. We call it Lieu Unique d'Accompagnement. The goal is, for people with disability, you have just one door. You want to recruit, and you could recruit people with disability, you have one door. And we support a new employment service software, and the employer could ask us, Cap Emploi or France Travail, we want to recruit, we need your help because we find that people with disability and we need to adapt the post. Okay, just one phone number, one address, one advisors. And regarding the difficulties of employers to recruit, the French government creates a specific dispositif, entreprise inclusive. It's linked with the law for 6% of people with disability in their effective. But also, it's just not 6% the goal. The goal is you're a recruiter and you want to be inclusive. You want to show you're able to recruit. And this is our job, France Travail and Cap Emploi, to promote this activity plan and to promote people with disabilities profile. Yes.
Despite all these evolvings, inadequacies persist. The unemployment rate of disabled workers is 12% in June 2023, about 7.2 for the entire population. So the rate is large and too much large, what is not acceptable. Despite more than 11,600 apprenticeships entries in 2022 compared to 4,700 in 2019, but it remains 1.3% of the total volume. So to deal with transition between school and work, it's not enough. It's very, very, very insufficient. And despite the obligation law, the rate of employment of people with disability remains 3.5, 3.6 or 7% now. So there are many efforts to do. In the One-Stop Disability Supercenter issue, what is really new is that a team is composed by very different people, a professional team with psychologists, with advisors, employers and advisors, or psychosocial advisors, and they're working together about collective recruitment plan, about events, about individual support, and we are monitoring not as neighbors but together, and that's the big change. It's corresponding to Daphne's presentation. Monitoring issue is the main part of the problem, because before this movement, PES was monitoring employment rates, vocational rates, and so. But now, the monitoring of disability issue is in the heart of the system, and it's really, really new for us.
Regarding what Lionel said, we have a new ambition in France. As you may know, we have a new name on the PES, but it's not only a new name. It's a new organization, and we have also the results of the 6th National Conference of Disability. The National Conference of Disability, each 3 years, under the authority of the President of the Republic, decided some new measure regarding disability, regarding the French Public Services Organization. So we have in France Travail a new program, a transformation program, in charge specifically of disability. The people of disability is not just a little part of the people. We have to manage them specifically. We consider people with disability are, first of all, competencies, and all we do each time must include, as the French PES, include specific issue of people with disability. So it's not only a question of partnership with Cap Emploi or with other structure. It is an integrated part of all our action. My directorate, I have to work for job seekers and employment service offering. I have to work with about the accessibility of our site, and not only for people with chair. I have to work about the accessibility of our tools, and not only our paper, but also our internet service, and have to be all time inclusive and link each time with Cap Emploi and with all partners who work on. Now I think we move on specific, but we said a large part, I think.
Yes, we said yet a lot.
Maybe we could go to the specific measure of the national conference.
Yes, we can go on specific measures. In several territories, a service offer dedicated to licenses for incapacity. That was a priority to get a job, to get a first job, to get a job when you have when you are disabled people. But there is two other stakes, very important: to keep it and to progress in your career. The two topics are very, very high level priority today. To keep the job is the main issue. It's very difficult in the French system because there are some specialized medics at works, specialized medic offices and organisms. There are employers, and there are no data, no real data about the number of people that are losing the job because of the disabled situation. Part of Cap Emploi support is to avoid to lose the job because of health situations due to changes in the job, in the firm, due to changes in the personal situation, and try to make a coordination between the employers, workers, and all the measures that exist. But after the national conference, Jean-Christophe talked about, President of Republic made a priority to implement a new dedicated service about these situations that needs a very tough individual support to provide what it's very difficult for us to translate a recovery approach to accept the situation, to get further in the job, to try other professional. I don't know how to translate this. To help people to stay at work, even if their situation is difficult. Help me, Jean-Christophe, please.
Else question must not be a good reason to leave the job. Maybe.
It will be a very reinforced individual support. One advisor will have 30-35 people to support, but not a huge volume, because it's impossible. It's a very individual support to help to find the other job or the other training issue. Second measure is promoting access for job seekers beneficiaries of employment obligation to training under common law. That is a huge goal, to make all the common law training system much more open to disability situations. Sometimes before there were dedicated specific programs, but it's not enough. So the goal is to make changes within the common law training system. And it's a very, very tough evolving, which means to sensibilize and to train all the sector, and it's this is the second major plan, and the third.
Yes, and the third yes is the optimization of stakeholder synergy. The question, the reform of the French labor market. It's not only change the name and work together. It's also to create a new network who need to work together, who need to have the same survey, the same goal. And regarding people with disability, we need to manage all structures who work on the question of people with disability and employers. And yes.
Yes, just to say, in Daphne's presentation, there were a circle with four parts, and that's what we try to explain. Measures are taken in the 4 places at the same time: monitoring, institutions, but also dedicated teams and specialized teams, but in the common law system, in training and in employment support, and in relationships between economy, relationships with employers, and so it's all these things are moving in the same time. That's what that's very interesting, but very large approach about public policies. Very French, very French. Paris from the Eiffel Tower and all the territory at the same time.
And also, because it's not enough to change all, we want to, the government asked to have a new point of view about the fund. Jennifer and Daphne said about the fund. We have some structures who help employers or job seekers. In France, of course, because we need to have a specific organization, we have a specific fund called AGFIP, who help employers, private employers, because for public employers we have another one. And we think it's necessary, the French government think it's necessary to have a new point of view about who we have to help, when, and why. And we need to understand the results of the help. It's not only to give money, it's also to help them to promote their needs about competencies. It's also to have an organization inside big companies specifically for people with disability. So it's also a reform probably in 2025.
And to give a very concrete example, our belongings to EURES network is very recent, 2023. Before, there was the PES system involved in EURES and the specific system for disabled people, but not in EURES. And as there is a common monitoring and common work about all these issues, we are gathering in the enlargement of EURES approach in France. For example, it's very concrete. About the supporting employers?
Yes, we could have a focus on 2 specific measures. The first one is for employers, of course, and the idea is to accelerate recruitment. And it's a national program for all job seekers, built with Cap Emploi, of course, but built also with the Mission Locale, specifically for young people without disabilities, young people. And the new France Travail and the new employment network built a program accelerating recruitment, and inside the program we integrate a specific disability language in order to go toward and help our advisors to explain to employers what is a people with disability, what is not, what you need, how we could help you to recruit. And the integration of disability is not only words, it's also in tools, targeting tools, built task forces together, Cap Emploi and France Travail, to promote profile and CVs. It's also a specific employer page in the intranet. It's also training for our job seekers who are on phone. We have a specific phone for employers. And now there could be a trend about question to disabilities, how I can recruit people with disability, what is your help, and so on. So in all program of the French PES and French European French network, take account about disability. And it's yours, Lionel.
It's the concrete tradition of the program is to make a space of relationships in confidence between candidates and employers. Even if there's a law, an obligation, many job seekers with disability in France are not confident enough to talk about their situation, their real situation. And on the other hand, we have firms that are very specialized in communication. For example, Total, French company in petroleum, in oil, is the best in environmental issue. Everybody knows that. And with disability issues, it's the same. Some companies are very large, are making very large communication, but when we talked about employment, they are research engineers in very specific jobs with high level capacities, and candidates, the people with disabilities, job seekers, they are working in many different sectors, and they don't recognize themselves in this communication. And what's at stake is to create a confident space with employers that have done many recruitments before, or that are involved in maintaining employment of people with disabilities on the one hand, and candidates that they are daring to tell that there are disabled people and need to be considered at this before to be recruited. And it's a very huge evolving, because during many years, due to RGPD issues, due to data system issues, when we talked with France Travail about how to recognize disabled people within the system or disabled practices of employers, it was impossible. We are not allowed to do this. It's not legal, and so it's the first time that we are creating a common relationship space based on confidence between employers and job seekers and probably workers in the future. So it's a brand new program, and we are making a lot of hopes about this, because when we can talk about disabled situation before the encounter, and it's open for us, and it will be something very important for us in the EURES network, because if we are working with an employer that is open-minded to talk about the disabled situation, perhaps we can talk about for an incoming issue in in a harder level of disabled situation, because if you are an Irish job seeker, a Danish job seeker, or a Spanish job seeker, you want to come in France, you have to have an address and then to go on at the first step of the administrative issues to contact the maison départementale des personnes, local house of disabled people, to get your 30 pages document, to have, and someone in the conversation talked about the mobility card in Europe. That was the first huge step for European disabled people. And we hope a lot about this. We have many things to do about the evolving of not the law, but all the rules, the technical rules in each country, in each member's country, to make mobilities possible within France, but to go out or to income job seekers from other parts of Europe and so on. And it's a brand new program for us.
And so now about the European mobility and disability.
I'm all the time in advance with the further slide. We are very proud about this flyer, because we gathered in EURES French network in 2023 with France Travail and with the NCO France Travail, and two partners. APEC for executives, it's very French, a dedicated organism for executives, APEC, and Cap Emploi, Chaos Network, for dedicated on disability issues. And the first thing we made together was this flyer. It's very symbolic for us, because it's not, it was a common flyer for all the stakeholders of EURES French network, and not the dedicated flyer for Cap Emploi teams. You know, it was very important for us to carry on with the disability issues together. And during all the US events during this year, we were sharing about disability situation and issues, and it's very, very interesting according to the changes we try to explain with Jean-Christophe. Today,
as usual, we'll speak about the next slide finally, because
as usual,
this is exactly what you said. We want to develop the idea. It's not to have a specific program for job seekers, for people who want to work, for work, for etc. It's to have an integrated service offer, mobility and disability. And now it's your time, Lionel.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. Today, we are gathering 26 EURES advisors in Cap Emploi teams, with all the mobility advisors within France Travail network, and they are all working together in mobility teams and with a coordination in regional areas. It makes new possibilities, and what was very important this year was to support the first situations, the first relationships with employers and job seekers about disability issues. And it was a real acknowledgement of how much it is difficult to make comparisons between the different countries in the rules, in the allowances, in the possibilities, and so. First of all, we are very, very, very happy that the first mobility was achieved in October for a job seeker, a woman of a long-term in employment situation, more than 2 years. and she had a proposal in a big data, in a big firm, in big data firm in Dublin. I let you imagine the one. And she is working now in Dublin as a customer officer. And it's possible. It is possible to gather the measures, the support, the coordination with EURES advisors in Dublin to help. And so we are observing this with a very specific attention, because that's what we want to do with France Travail and Cap Emploi and APEC, is to create mobilities possible much more than today in France, but also to welcome job seekers from other parts of Europe. And we know it is difficult because we will have to deal with health issues, administrative issues, the rights. They are not the same in Italy, France. We know this, but we want to make the point, to make the priority that mobility is possible in a fair job market in Europe. We have to do this as a priority. And advisors they are considering what is the levels, what is possible to mobilize, but they are also considering the lack, the shortcomings in different parts. And one idea we have, but we would like to propose it in the work program 2025, is to create duos in EURES network to talk about disability situations, because we know it will be the very hard top situations due to different rules and so it should be very, very interesting to create duos to talk about how we move between Ireland and France in the two parts, and to mobilize the best we can mobilize at time, and with a further goal is to assume that we are dedicated to make the rules evolve in Europe, as the example of the mobility card, with the major topic, the reasonable accommodation. If there is no technical scheme, reasonable accommodation can be a very light idea. In fact, we need to have references to know what we talk about, to help advisors to advise. And it's very, very important part of the situation. Integrated two components for us. It's the right to compensation and the recovery approach to try to go further the disability situations. Jean-Christophe, do you want to?
No, you said all we could say.
As a conclusion for me, we are very proud about this photo. It was taken in Strasbourg, in the European Parliament, in September 23. And that are all the stakeholders in Cap Emploi network, as non-benefit organizations. They are not salaries, they are not workers, they are volunteer people that are working free for the network as presidents, administrators, and so. And they were gathered in Strasbourg with France Travail teams, headmasters, and so, to talk about the evolving of the system. And that's a major part of the issue that is politically involves as such as practical involvement of advisors. To make this evolving possible, we have to be active in all the parts simultaneously. And in my point of view, things are moving very quick since 2022, and it's very a major hope factor for us. Jean-Christophe, you're France Travail, you have the last word.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much. And we could be here for if you have some questions, of course.
Thank you both for the very nice and thorough explanation and presentation. Before we move on, if anyone has any questions or comments, as usual, please feel free to write them in the chat. I see that in the meantime, some of the participants have started exchanging some information. I see, for example, one comment from Ireland that says that employability services provide a service to job seekers with disabilities to secure work, and it is funded through the Department of Social Protection. Jennifer, I'm sure you know this very well. And I can also see a comment from Portugal that says that the Public Employment Service in Portugal provides specific support programs for employers who employ people with disabilities and for employees with disabilities, and it also includes quotas. And then I have a comment from one of your colleagues from Cap Emploi that says that what's important in your job is also to highlight to employers that job seekers with disabilities are above all job seekers with skills and the ability to work well. So this is also in line with what you have presented so far. I see quite a few people thanking you for the information provided thus far. So unless I see further questions, I would like to thank you, the speakers, for attending the webinar and providing their insights and sharing information with us. And you can see them all on the screen. Before we close, I would like to ask the audience to fill in an evaluation questionnaire on the webinar, which you should see quite soon on the screen, and these will help us improve the upcoming webinars and to make sure that what we present to you stays relevant. So this should come up in a while. Yes, indeed. So if you have any questions, write them in the chat. Otherwise, I would like to thank you all and wish you a good day and a good weekend. Thanks again to the speakers, and I hope I will see you all soon.
Thanks for inviting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you
very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. And let's see. You should see the questionnaire soon. Thank you.
To Daphne and Jennifer, I hope we have the occasion to exchange about the Euro